And good morning, everybody. I'm Dionne Mejer, CEO of Inside Sales by Design and a little platform called salesclass.ai. And beyond excited that we are here with Caryn Kopp. We're talking about the 5 planks of door opening success. When Caryn was 11 years old, her neighbor who owned a franchise company told her she had a great phone voice and wondered if she'd like to try getting appointments for them. She won awards for this skill, and it opened the door, pun intended, for Caryn to launch her award-winning firm, Kopp Consulting, where she holds the title of Chief Door Opener. And that's exactly what they do. Get business leaders the executive level appointments they need with companies like Verizon, Kraft, and Target, to name a few. Kopp Consulting has been named Sales Outsourcing Provider of the Year and has been on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing companies for 2 consecutive years. Caryn's talent for seeing a company's path to cash has inspired her to help thousands of business leaders and sellers secure initial meetings with their most important prospects. An expert in business development, a best-selling author of Biz Dev Done Right, and a prolific speaker, she is here today to share her expertise in helping you open more doors so you can close more sales and take your business to the next level. Caryn, we are beyond excited that you are here, and I know this is going to be an amazing conversation. So thank you for joining us today. And everybody that's here, you're in for a wild ride and some good nuggets. Make sure you're taking some notes and follow up with Caryn. She had put her contact information in the chat. Follow up with each other. Be on the lookout for follow-up emails from all of us. And man alive, let's be great at what we do and serve our clients for sure. So Caryn, with that, I'm going to go ahead and let you take it from there, and we'll be sure to interject questions and go from there.
Well, thank you very much and welcome everyone. Yes, a wild ride for today. Everybody who feels they should be getting in more doors than they are getting in needs to pay attention to what we're talking about today. Because if you're not getting in as many doors as you think you should be, there's probably a problem in one or more of 5 key planks. That's what we call the 5 key planks of door opening success. And a lot of times people will say to me, well, how have things changed since the pandemic hit? We're a year past that now. And there are a lot of people who have successfully made the switch to virtual selling, but not everybody who successfully made the switch to virtual selling has also made the switch to virtual prospecting. And that's what we're talking about, because without the trade shows, conferences, and in-person meetings, how are we meeting the prospects we need to fill the top of the funnel? And so I'm going to be taking you through that today. The reason why I get to be here today and share all of this is because I run a company that does executive level appointment setting for other companies. I have a whole team of very experienced door openers who are representing our clients and getting them meetings every day. So when I am coming to a seminar like this, I'm bringing to you the information from our door openers, what they're using every day that's working. And one of the things I can tell you is that since the pandemic, what's working is changing. Every couple of weeks, there are new things that are going on and new ways that we're reaching prospects that are working. And so I'm bringing you the very latest information. And in fact, some of the people who have seen some of my programs before might say, hey, wait a minute, this is new content. You didn't present this last time. That's because prospecting changes, and it's important that we keep up with that. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, and feel free to interrupt me. That's fine. And Dionne's going to monitor the chat. Hang on just a second. Zoom was not cooperating this week. Let's see. Do you see just one slide, Dionne?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so this is me, as Dionne mentioned. I have a book which is a bestseller called Biz Dev Done Right. It's all about the blind spots in the sales process that keep you from the success you should have. We go over the 5 planks in there, but there's a lot more in there as well. But let's focus right on the 5 planks. Okay, so this is what most people feel like when they hit my doorstep. They feel like they're this guy over here on one side of this big chasm, and they want to cross over to this side of the big chasm. And they either don't know how to do that, or it's taking them too long to do it. They don't have time. Maybe they want to swim upstream and meet with bigger prospects, Maybe they want bigger opportunities. Maybe it's a new market, new product, or they just don't physically have any more time in their day to fit in business development. So what do they do? And I'll tell you, I remember working with the artist who did this. And when he originally had the prospect door, it was just like an office door. And I said to him, oh no, it's not that easy. And so he drew this like steel trap door, and then he had a regular office door handle on it. And I was like, yeah, it's not that easy. And so then he drew this vault. And I'm like, okay, we're almost there. Now make the chasm wider, because there's no way that this guy over here should be able to take a running leap and get to the other side, because it's not that easy. So if you feel that you should be getting in more doors, this may feel like for this guy what it feels like for you. So what we need to do is build the bridge. There are 5 planks. I'm going to share with you what each of the planks is, and then we're going to go into some depth. I'm going to give you tips and ideas and strategies that we use that are very helpful for our clients. Okay, so here are the 5 planks. The first one is the right target, not just any target, but the right target. I'll go into more detail in a minute. The right message, and by message, I don't mean marketing messaging. I mean sales messaging, the spoken word, the email meant for one person to move one person from one place in his or her thinking to the next. The right answers for objections, not any answer, but the right one that will move you forward in the process. The right door opener, by this I mean the right person doing the work. Not everybody who's tasked with door opening should be opening doors. Some people are great at closing, not so great at opening. Some people would rather put a stick in their eye than do this part of the job. Well, if that's the case, then you're going to need to listen to some of these strategies. And then the 5th plank is the right execution. Is it a phone call? Is it an email? How many? What do you say on the first call? What do you say on the 20th? What do you say on the 40th one when you're reaching out to prospects? And then, of course, how much time you're spending and the consistency with which you're contacting these prospects. These are the 5 planks. I'm going to go into depth on this. I'm also going to point out the problems, the blind spots where people tend to get the planks wrong. But let's take a look at this. If any one of these planks was missing, Dionne, what do you think happens to the bridge? Does it stay up?
No.
No, it falls down. So you might have the right target. You may know who to prospect, but if you don't know what to say to them when you get them on the phone, you don't get to get in the door. If you know what to say, but then you can't answer their objections, you don't get to get in the door. If with right execution, if you have a crappy voicemail, a crappy email, you don't make a positive impression, you don't get in the door. So all 5 of these planks need to be in place and working properly in order for this to work. All right, so let's start out with right target. There are a lot of people who will come to me and say later in the sales process, they get stuck. The prospects go silent. There's some sort of a roadblock, a surprise decision maker comes in at the very end, and the sale will stall. Most of the time when a sale is stalled or prospects are silent, there is usually a problem going on in target. When we look at proposals that have stalled and we analyze, was this really the right target to begin with? A lot of times the answer is no. So my suggestion is to make the world a much smaller place and focus on only those prospects who are exactly right for you, a slam dunk for you. In fact, we would call that an important win. We only want to focus on prospects that can represent for us an important win. Why? Because there's only so much time in a week. So if you spend 25% on prospects that were never right for you to begin with, then you don't get to spend that 25% of your time on prospects who are exactly right. It sounds so simple, but if you take a look at your prospect list, who on your prospect list really doesn't deserve your time and attention? And usually when we go through this process with people, 25% of the prospect list will fall away, leaving all sorts of time for the right kinds of sales activities. How do you figure out who's a good prospect for you? This is one of the things people have been asking me, especially since the pandemic hit. They say, Caryn, who's spending Some people say, hey, where's the effing money? I can't find it. The people who used to be my best prospects and my best clients are no longer buying what they used to. Well, just like the world has changed for you, it has also changed for your prospects, and it's changed for your clients. And what they used to need may no longer be what they need now. But that doesn't mean they can't be clients of yours. It just means you may need to sell them something different or in a different way. So when clients come to us and we start working on putting together a door opener program for them, we help them think through target in a very strategic way. And so aside from size of company, level of decision maker, geography, and all those other good things, there are 3 additional filters that are more strategic that we recommend people use when they're thinking about making the world a smaller place with regard to prospects. And here it is. Dionne, do you remember Venn diagrams from 5th grade?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so here's a Venn diagram to help you figure out an important win for you.
I love
Which
it.
prospect groups would find you to be the obvious solution? Once they know that you exist, they would absolutely not take a step without you. And in fact, I like to take a tiny little subset of those prospects who would find you to be an obvious solution and identify those prospects who would find you to be the only solution. Let that sink in for a second. The only solution. So sometimes when I say that, people say to me, well, Caryn, the only solution, that's not a very big group. And I say, okay, fine, but do you have all of them? And the answer is typically no. So everybody who finds you to be the only solution should absolutely be clients of yours. And those people who find you to be an obvious solution are going to be drawn to you. So now let's overlay that with the people who not only find you to be the obvious solution, but also will willingly pay what you want to charge for your services. It's rare that a customer of ours comes to us wanting to sell on price. It's rare, but not everybody will pay on value. Not everybody. So if you want to sell on value and you're selling to a bunch of people who don't want to pay on value, that's a lot of wasted time. What if you can do some research and lock off that whole group of people who will never pay for value and just not contact them at all? Think about how much more efficient you could be with your time. And then overlay that with urgency. Which prospect groups are going to feel more urgency than others in having a meeting with you and then moving forward in the sales process? So when it comes to urgency, especially once the pandemic hit, we started talking about trigger events. So I want to talk about a couple of examples of trigger events and then have you think about a trigger event that might be affecting your prospect group that would make that prospect group want to meet with you sooner rather than other prospect groups. And I'll give you, it's a personal example actually. When the pandemic hit, I looked out into the market and I wanted to find out who was going to need door opening, who would sign on the dotted line faster than other people, who would take a meeting to discuss this sooner than other people. And I saw what was happening with business leaders and their banks. For those of you who remember the initial PPP, whether you had less than 500 employees or more than 500 employees, those business leaders had either a very positive or a very negative experience with their banks. So the people who had negative experiences were going to be in the market for a new bank. There is no way that someone who had a crappy experience was going to let that happen again, especially with the uncertainty that was going on in the economic environment all over the place. So what did we do? We contacted CEOs of banks and we talked to them about the trigger event, which was no surprise to them. They knew there were a bunch of people out in the market, but they also knew that because they had to service their current clients, they could not go out there and talk to all of these CEOs and direct them back to their bank. But we were the door openers. We could do it for them. And they started signing up for our service so that we could talk to the CEOs out there on their behalf and direct them to the bank. That was a trigger event that was going on for the banks. So let's talk about how you identify a trigger event for you. Think about an income statement. Think about top line revenue, labor pool, supply chain, even profit. Which of those areas is your prospect group being affected by right now? Is there something going on affecting your prospect group's top line revenue or the top line revenue of your prospect group's competitors? What's affecting their labor pool or the labor pool of their competitors? What's affecting their supply chain? A lot of things going on right now in the supply chain. Could be for your prospects or your prospects' competitors. So when you think about it like that, you may be able to identify 1, 2, maybe even 3 trigger events that are going on. Once you identify the trigger event, you can then narrow the group of prospects to those people who are experiencing that. And then you get to go to plank 2, which is the right sales message. And what do you say to those people that will make a difference? And let me just stop there. And Dionne, are there any questions about target, plank 1 from the group? And I spend a lot of time on target, and I know I do, but if you get target right, most of the other planks are going to be easier. Targets first, you gotta get target right. What, are there any questions people have?
We don't have any questions right now in the chat. However, I'd love to be able to say, I love the fact that you call out the important wins and laying the right groundwork to have the right target, because so many times the mindset is still literally just pull a list from anywhere and start blasting and something will happen.
Right. And just because, list and data and things like that, that's a lot of fun to have, but it's probably not that practical. You really need to go a little bit more narrow. And that's one of the reasons why I collect these doors. You see my little doors because I'm a cheap door opener. So there are big gold doors. Those are the ones you want. We got a blue door over there, probably not so good. We've got one that looks like the door of a house. We've even got a red door. So you can go in that door, but you may be in the red because maybe it's not that kind of client for you. We've got some other doors, and I got one that fell over this morning. That was a small blue door and it just kind of fell over. Maybe not the best door. So important to be very careful and hand select the groups of prospects that you need. Once you have your prospects, then you need to open up personal communication. And in a few slides, I'm going to show you some examples of not so personal communication, which doesn't really help you very much. But what I want to zero in on right now, in terms of what you say, voicemail, 6 sentences. The 6-sentence voicemail, there's an article on my site that will break down each of those sentences for you so that you can develop your own 6-sentence voicemail. Live dialogue, 2 sentences and a question. You can't stuff a 6-sentence voicemail into a conversation with a prospect who answers the phone. You have to have 2 sentences and a question. Email, I've got an example a little later on of a really bad email. You got to make it short. Get rid of all the salesy stuff. If you think about yourself and if you're a decision maker for certain things that you have to buy either for your home or your office or your business, think about how you would want to be approached. Would you want a salesy email subject line that's cutesy? Would you want the breakup email? Like how would you really feel about that? If a prospect said to you, if you don't answer me in 30 days, I'm going to stop talking to you. Does that help? I mean, really, does that help? There are a lot of people who will hide behind email also, and they'll send email after email after email. But I don't know about you, but as the leader of my company, I get about 250 emails a day. I get people writing me who I have hired to do work, and I can't read their emails either. So if something looks like it's not meant for me, or somebody didn't do their research to say something for me, I'm probably not going to answer it. I'm going to move right over. And the opens, well, that's not really an indicator of interest, because somebody could have opened it by mistake and they're really not all that interested. What we have found works is a combination of phone, meant for one person. Say something that's really meaningful. Do your research on these people. Aside from the message you have, how can you make it more personalized to them? And by personalized, I don't mean changing the name on an email meant for 999 people. That's a marketing activity. We're here today to talk about sales. Sales is meant for one person. Email communication or phone or voicemail meant for one person. And even though I get all these emails of people trying to sell things to me, guess what? My phone sitting right here. My cell phone right here. They're not calling me too. Phone and email in combination is what works. But then people will say, well, phone, nobody's working in their offices. How do I reach them? Well, you can get the office numbers, which often now will roll over to somebody's cell phone, or you can have a cell phone. Do I recommend reaching out on the cell phone first? No, I recommend reaching out by email and phone to their office phone, leave a message, do it again the next week. If you don't reach them, then you can go over to, we don't call it the cell phone, we call it the remote number. It's the remote number, the remote address. So how do you get that? Well, there are resources like ZoomInfo that you could go to and look up a cell phone number. If you don't have the budget to do that, you can get tools like InfoUSA from your public library. A lot of times you can get it that way, or you can contact the company. And then people say, well, if nobody's there, how do I reach anybody? Well, what you can do is call their accounts receivable department or their customer service department, because they always answer the phone. And then you can ask for somebody's remote number. Don't use cell phone number. It sounds a little creepy. And then, so you'll email, you'll leave a message at their work phone, and then you can then leave a message the following week and just let them know, I'm going to be trying your remote number, just wanted to let you know. And then you can send them a short text, or you can call them on their phones. We are finding people are plugged in around the clock, 7 days a week. People are just kind of doing the work when they need to, especially if they have things going on at home, like children who are learning at home or taking care of elderly parents. So let's talk about what do you do when you get some.
Caryn, we've got two questions that came in.
Okay, let's answer those.
So there's one from Cindy that says, is there a way to identify prospects that will willingly pay?
Yeah. So there are a lot of different ways to do this, but one of the ways that I recommend is with math. Let's say you are selling something that's an expensive service, and the person, or you have people on your prospect list who, when they use your service, they don't make a whole lot back in terms of return. That's probably not going to work out well. You'll probably need to spend a lot of time convincing them. It's like a really hard hill to climb, where you're climbing up this mountain and it feels like you have a boulder tied around your waist, and then there's somebody up at the top of the mountain chucking rocks at you. That's what this feels like. Like, why go through that? Find out which people would willingly pay. If you sell something expensive, the people who you're selling it to may also be selling something expensive. If you are an outsourced solution, let's say, you may want to target those companies who also provide outsourced solutions, because they will get the idea of paying for that. I hope that makes sense. I can go on and on. Let me know if you have a follow-up question. Is there another question as well?
Yes, there is one that says, and I love that symmetry and what you were saying about that, Caryn. I think that's so spot on, right? Because to your point, you spend so much time, you can spend a lot of time educating, and that's just sometimes hard at the end of the day. So
it's a strategic choice, actually, whether you want to educate your prospects and work hard like that, or whether you want to choose prospects who have already decided in a likely way that a service like yours makes sense. That's when it's a faster path to the cash.
Yep, absolutely. And then the other question we have is, how can you use ZoomInfo in the process for finding right targets?
Well, it's the criteria first. And a lot of people don't think about it that way, because they think, oh, wow, here's all this great data. But the first thing you need to do strategically is identify your filters. So as I said, size of company, level of decision maker, geography, industry niche, all of that, and then put in those the other ones that I'm showing you. Who would find you to be an obvious solution? Who would willingly pay? Who would feel urgency? And I'll just give you one example of obvious solution, and it's not so obvious. So a lot of these are very creative if you think about it. We're doing a program right now for a company that's targeting Fortune 500 companies, and they felt that all the Fortune 500 companies would be interested in what they have. And as our door opener got into it with the right messaging and had a lot of conversations, it became clear that certain Fortune 500 companies did not place priority on what our client was selling. Whether they had it or they didn't have it doesn't matter. The company as a whole placed no priority on it. So if they had something in place, they were not going to spend time or money to fix it. And if they didn't have it in place, they were not going to spend time or money to evaluate it. And so as we looked at the data, we found that the companies who were in a number one position in the market were the ones who were consistently saying they weren't putting any money or time against it. But the ones in the number two or the number three positions were. What did we do? Aside from all the other criteria that I mentioned, size of company, level of decision, all that other good stuff, we lopped off the number one player in every one of those markets. And we're focusing on the number two and the number three player. By focusing on those players, we're able to further refine the message and make the message more of a slam dunk for the target. So it's the criteria is set first. Then you go into ZoomInfo or one of the other platforms and you plug in your criteria. Once you hit go, don't just start calling people. Then you're going to want to double check that everybody on that list deserves your time and attention. Because if they don't spend time there. Don't even open up that conversation. The other thing everybody should know is that even though we're getting that information, we have a research department that verifies it too. Since the pandemic, people who have been laid off, they've been furloughed, and sometimes the people aren't correct, sometimes the phone numbers aren't correct, sometimes the email addresses aren't correct. And if you have that as part of your sales process, you're wasting time. We recommend that people either have someone else do that or do it outside of call time, and don't make that part of your cadence because it's a different rhythm of work, and we recommend the workflow stays pure. Does that help answer the question? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so for sure. Because it sounds like there's a little bit of homework, right? There's a validation, if you will, at the end of the day before you can kind of move forward quickly, which is also very normal. And to your point, though, is help solidify that path forward.
Right, exactly, and make it the most efficient path forward. Because once you know you have a really clean list, then you're going to spend time with these people. They're going to become your friends. A lot of years ago, when I was the first door opener at Kopp Consulting, it was before CRMs were really a big deal, like before all of that. And I would sit there with all of these people who were my prospects, and I'd say, what are all my friends doing today? Because they were my friends, even though I hadn't met them yet. I had a lot of important things that they needed to know about so their lives could be better. And that's what brings us into the sales messaging. So what I want to share with you is the framework for, we call it the Kopp Gap method of sales messaging. And it's a framework, yeah, for creating gap between all the other competitors that are out there and you, and the gap is value. Because nobody cares actually why you're different. And people spend so much time trying to figure out why we're different and explain why we're different. And that may work in marketing. In sales, nobody cares why you're different. Nobody cares at all. They only care why you are of more value to them. And if you can articulate that in language that's relevant and compelling to them, the doors open sooner and the sales close faster. So I'm going to share with you this framework. It's very simple. It's 3 sentences, and I'll give you a couple word prompts and you fill in the blank. And then when you do that, then you're going to want to take it for a test drive with representative A-level clients and prospects. If you test drive it on your friends, unless you tell them who they need to pretend to be, they're going to be listening to it with their ears, not the same thing. You have to test it with people who are representative A-level clients and prospects. Okay, Deanna, you're ready for the framework? And I'll have to tell you this, you guys, it was years ago that I came out with this framework, and I released it in public in a 300-person session, and it was live. And I gave them this framework. I gave them the chance to work on their own gap message. And then I asked somebody to stand up and read his. And it was interesting because the room was full of 75% people who were trying to sell to big pharma and 25% people who were from big pharma and they were decision makers. So when this guy stood up and he recited his new gap message, the person at the next table was somebody from Pfizer who stood up and asked for his card. And I was like, okay, I think I got something here. I think this is going to work. So here it is. Here's the
I love it.
Okay, so simple. Creating your gap message. Anyone can, and you fill in the blank, but not everyone can, and you fill in the blank. And then, for example, and you fill in the blank. So I'm going to share one with you. This one comes from the promotional products industry, where there are a lot of competitors out there. It's hard to show and articulate why any one company is of more value in the eyes of the prospects. But here's one way that this company went about doing it. They said, anybody can say they provide great customer service, but not everyone can deliver on their promise. For example, we once chartered a plane at our expense to transport the supplies on time. That's how much we feel about customer service. All right, so we'll break that down for a second. So anybody can say they provide great customer service. And by the way, if you provide great customer service, great, you get to stay in business because you have to provide great customer service or go home. You don't get to have any clients. So, but a lot of people say that, especially in a very crowded industry, but then they don't elaborate on what that means and why it's so valuable to their prospects. So anyone can say they provide great customer service, but not everyone can deliver on their promise. And then they went into their, for example. So think about yours. What is your gap message? And here are some tips for coming up with your own. And you could take a picture of the gap message framework if you'd like, so you can work on it on your own. But a couple of things. When you put in the second line, but not everyone can, it's critical that whoever hears it is going to nod along and completely agree with whatever line number 2 is. It's important that instead of having lots of words, like 50 words, see if you can get the whole thing down to 25 words and have every single word and every single phrase work hard for you. Another tip when it comes to this is the disconnect. Something that might be very obvious to you may be not so obvious to someone else. And a lot of times people will use industry jargon that really means something to them and means nothing to other people. I have a great example of that. Years ago in wealth management, somebody said to me, oh, well, I'm the quarterback. But he didn't elaborate by what he meant by the quarterback. And that meant something to him. It meant that he coordinates everything amongst the other trusted advisors on behalf of his client. But he didn't explain it. He just said to me, well, I'm the quarterback. Well, guess what? I don't follow football. I have no idea what that means. It was a complete disconnect. Another example of a disconnect is boutique. Sometimes smaller companies will say they're boutique. Well, boutique may mean one thing to you that's a positive, but it may mean something to the person who hears it, which is a negative. So if there's a chance that a single word could cause a disconnect or something negative, or your intent won't land the same way with the person who hears it, you must change that word. You must elaborate it. Industry jargon doesn't really belong in this particular framework for sales messaging. Let's see, what else? At the end of this, once you have your gap message put together and you've already shortened it and you've looked at every single word to make sure there's not a disconnect, look at every word and make sure that it's working hard for you. I'll give you an example, and this has to do with word pairs of intensity. Our clients are satisfied with our service versus our clients are grateful. Satisfied versus grateful. Grateful is going to work harder for you than the word satisfied. And I know we all like to think of at 30,000 feet, and this feels like it's about 100 feet. But sometimes the 100-foot issues, when you solve them, change everything for the 30,000-foot issues. So go down to 100 feet, look at every single word, make sure it's working hard for you, and then test this out and see how it lands. If people are nodding along, they're like, oh yeah, that's right, then you've hit your gap message. Sales is situational. So you may need a different gap message for different people. You may need a different gap message for different parts of the sales process, whether you're at the moment of getting in the door or whether you're at the moment of closing a sale. Once you know your gap message and you know your sales language, there's a formula to remember, which is language plus delivery equals outcome. What you say and how you say it determines the result. Now, I talked before about emails that will receive no response. Here's one of them. Here you go. So yeah, don't bother trying to read this because your prospects won't either. An email, avoid the cutesy subject lines, be human, be authentic, a sentence or two max, 2 paragraphs, 3 max. If you want a meeting, ask for one. Don't make your prospects work so hard to figure out what you want. You can put that right in your first sentence. So I can go on and on about that. I also have one that I didn't include in this deck, which is avoiding crappy LinkedIn messages. You know what I'm talking about. You've probably received them. Somebody who thinks they know you better than they do, and they send you this whole big long thing to read, which you're not going to read it because you're going to know that that person did no research on you at all. But Dionne, the one that I got, which was like phenomenally crappy, was he wrote, hi, and then in parentheses, contact name here, and then asked to connect with me. Yes. So business development is a slow dance. It is more important to do a great job with fewer people than it is to do a crappy job with lots of people. When you're going fast, there's a lot of opportunity for mistakes. If you go slow and double check your work, even to the point where somebody sent something to me the other day and they were referencing 3 attachments. Well, there were 2. In a detail-oriented business, the details really matter. Do I want that person sending things out on my behalf? I don't think so. I don't think so. We'll just move on from that. So I had a client years ago who he had very detailed proposals, and he left the G out of the word grand in grand total on proposal. And I said to him, listen, can you just put the G in? Because if there's anything they're going to look at on this entire proposal, it's the grand total line. And then he didn't do it. I'm like, why wouldn't you do that? I said, how about this? For my birthday, will you add the G in grand total so that when your prospects look at this, they will think you are as professional as the person who actually got you in the door. Let's talk about, we've talked about a lot about target, a lot about the right sales message. What I just walked you through is sales messaging and a little bit about the answer for the objection. I already have a vendor for that, which is what the gap message will help you do. The 4th plank is having the right person for the job. And here is where there's a serious blind spot for the salespeople as well as business leaders. Most people know the difference between the hunters and the farmers. The farmers grow the business and the hunters find the business. But what most don't know, and it's a big blind spot, is that within the world of hunters, there are different kinds of hunters. Let me let that sink in for a second. Within the world of hunters, there are different kinds of hunters. There are those salespeople who are phenomenal at having the meeting and closing the sale. In our world, we call them the closers. There are other hunters who are phenomenally good. They just have it in their DNA to open up doors with people they don't know. They don't need to be at a conference, a trade show, or an in-person networking meeting to do it. They don't have to be standing next to somebody on the buffet line to do it. They can contact somebody they don't know, say something meaningful, and get an outcome. In our world, those are the openers. We only hire openers. 21 years I've owned this business, we only hire openers. And what I'm going to show you next is going to be a surprise. So here's the percentage of openers versus closers within the world of hunters. Here it is. Openers versus closers. It is very difficult to find people who are phenomenally good at opening. Easier to find people who are really great at closing. But
Mhm.
in sales, you usually have one person in both of these roles, when it's rare to find one person who's equally good at both of these tasks. So what do? If you are a closer who's tasked with opening, you're going to want to set time blocks aside for yourself and make yourself sit there. Don't answer customer inquiries during this time. Don't answer emails, don't answer texts, but put your head down and focus on this small group of prospects and do a great job with each one of them. If you're lucky enough and you can have an opener open the door for you, if you're a closer, then you can watch the magic happen all day long. It's really important to keep the top of the funnel full, especially for those great closers. Why would you take time away from closing to open? It's a different cadence of work. It's usually a different person. So we talked a little bit about execution already in terms of the kinds of emails, the kinds of phone calls. What I want to call your attention to is the number of weekly hours. This is where a lot of people go wrong. They don't put enough time into business development to make a difference. What we recommend people do is an N&R exercise. This is an article that's also on my blog at koppconsultingusa.com, koppconsultingusa.com. Go to the blog and you'll see an article on the N&R exercise. Keep track of time in quarter hour increments. And for each quarter hour, say what you're doing and then put an N next to anything that's a non-revenue generating activity and an R next to anything that's a revenue generating activity and add it up. You'll likely be shocked at how much N you have and how little R you have. But if you want more R, you have to do less N. It's just the way it goes.
It's a math problem.
It's a math problem. So you want to decide, like if your manager comes to you or if you're a manager and you go to your salespeople and you give them a report that's going to take them 3 hours to put together, well, guess what? You just lost 3 hours of sales activity. How important is that report to you? Do you really need it? Can someone else do it so that you can spend more time on R? A couple of last thoughts for you about new metrics for sales that we watch. The first is the percent of closed deals, which are the right deals. That goes right back to the important wins. Why close deals if they're not the right deals? When we hit the pandemic, a lot of people were taking on projects that really weren't the definition of important win. But now we're a year later. Redefine your definition for important win and then monitor the percent of deals which close, which are the right deals. The percent of times you face each objection, you can use your CRM to help you track this. If you face a high percentage of times that people are saying they're not interested, guess what? You may not be saying anything interesting. You may be targeting the wrong group of people, but it's important to know from a math perspective, how often are you facing one thing so you know how to diagnose what's going wrong and fix it for yourself. There are a bunch of ones here. The other one that I think is really important to go over is the percent of first meetings which go to second meetings. In our world, 99.9% of our first meetings go to second meetings. There really should be no reason why they don't. If they don't, it's one of three issues. You either weren't targeting the right people to begin with, or you didn't set up enough value in the meeting so that the prospect feels the second meeting is warranted, or the biggest offender is that people didn't ask for a second meeting. 99.9% of our first meetings go to second meetings. And then I have one slide to finish up on, and then we could take some questions if you like. But people always ask me, at what point do you just give up and say, how many times can I actually call this prospect? And I've had this experience myself where I've contacted somebody periodically over a year, 2 years. And at one point, I remember this one person who's at a big pharmaceutical company. And I thought to myself, at what point is it ridiculous to just contact this person again? But I'm a very methodical person and I could not bring myself to skip over her. That day I called her and I got her and she said, everything has changed. There's now an opportunity. We need to have this meeting. And my client got that meeting, and my client closed the business, and it was a big company that you would all know, and they still have that company as their client to this day. So you see my little mouse here with the helmet. Nothing's going to stop him from getting that cheese. And one of my favorite quotes is from Dan Kennedy, which is, the difference between garbage and salad is timing. So hang in there, because your competition won't. So I'm going to give you my contact information, and Dionne, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer or have any conversation you want.
Thank you so much, Caryn. What a great conversation. I love your final slide. And man alive, I don't know about everybody here on the call, but there are definitely some days where I feel like the mouse with the helmet on. For sure, for sure. And I think it's important too that you're saying never give up. And there's just so much value in that. And because things change and people change and circumstances change. So I think all of this has been instrumental and a great um, perspective, and not even a refresh, because there's different pieces here. There are pieces here that are spoken differently than some other pieces that we probably all know and love and have heard before. In your experience, where are the top two places to start for folks when they go, all right, I'm going to do a net new campaign, or we're going to try to generate net new business in this new world order? Where do you recommend people start?
Well, what I'm going to say is probably going to be a surprise to everybody who's listening, because you're probably all going to think it's, where's the target and how am I going to get the contact information? But that comes later. The first thing, the very first thing, is blocking time. How much time do you have? There's a client of ours who's going through this huge initiative for growing their business. And yet the people who are responsible for actually doing it, when you ask them how much time do they have for net new business, they'll say an hour to two a week. Well, if that's all you have, because they're seller doers, right? Some people are seller doers. So if that's all you have to be honest with yourself. And then if you do the N and R exercise and you can't find any more time for R, and an hour or two is going to be it, then you need to make a decision. Am I going to get some outside help, like with us with door opening, to do it? Or am I just going to live with an hour or two a week? Because if you know how much time you have, then you can adjust your expectations. And so you won't feel like a failure all the time, because you can't get in as many doors. Why? Because you don't have the time. And that's just the reality. It's a strategic decision that somebody has to make of what's going to go on the calendar and what's going to go off the calendar, right? And what you can decide on then, as soon as you know how much time you have, then you can decide how big your prospect list can be. No point in getting 100 prospects on a prospect list if all you have is an hour or two a week. Be realistic with yourself. Pick 5. And then maybe the first week call 2. The second week, call those 2 back and add a third. The third week, call those 3 and add a fourth. That's what you're going to have time to do well. So that probably surprised everybody, but figure out how much time you have for business development.
Caryn, I think that is amazing. And I love what you're saying as far as having realistic expectations and sit down to have that conversation, because we start talking about sales and people get excited and dollars for eyeballs and all this other stuff. And you're like, hang on a second, right? It's let's figure out what we can actually execute against.
And even like the TAM, like everybody's talking TAM, what's your TAM, total addressable market? Well, who cares what your total addressable market is if you only have an hour to approach them in a week? It doesn't matter.
Totally. Totally. It's so funny. And it's incremental, right? At the end of the day. So, Rome wasn't built in a day. Pick your analogy or pick your phrase and all that good stuff, right? It is about the steady path and the steady drumbeat of execution at the end of the day. So thank you. We had a couple comments come in on the chat.
Okay,
one of them too was from Howard Danette. Howard, so nice to see you. Thank you for joining us today. Howard is asking how he gets your book.
Okay, the Biz Dev Done Right book is on Amazon. You can get it from there. I also have a book called The Path to the Cash, The Words You Need to Bypass Those Darn Prospect Objections. You can get that on my website. which is koppconsultingusa.com.
Love it. Love it. And Caryn, we don't have any more questions. And I know folks are probably wrapping up here and mentally transitioning to their next Zoom call or lunch, depending on where you're at in the country or the world. So Caryn, thank you again so much. We really appreciate you joining us today. For everybody, again, Caryn had put her website in the chat earlier. Make sure you visit, reach out to connect with her. Be on the lookout for follow-up as well. Everybody, you will receive follow-up messages from Caryn as well as myself. So again, be on the lookout for all of that. Connect with us, and we wish you amazing success in your door opening efforts. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great day. You may
Cheers.
drop off now. Thank you, Caryn.
Bye.
Bye.